All right, everyone. Can you guys see me? Let's see if we could do this. Actually, it should be sideways. There you go.
Yay!
Ha!
We've done it.
Yes. Woo! Okay.
I love your mustache.
I had to get a little crazy, you know. We're going to have a good time today, everybody. It's going to be a good day.
Yes, fun is definitely the most important thing in this conversation.
All right, so while we get ourselves organized, I just wanted to say hello to everyone and welcome to Embracing Our Shades of Power, right, Savannah?
Woo!
Woohoo! I'm so excited.
Me
And I
too.
just can't hide it. All right, so I know we sent out an intro video, and if you guys can't hear us or if you can't, if we're having any quality issues, just let us know and we'll slow down, pause, rewind, whatever we need to do. But we did send out an intro video, and I just wanted to sort of reiterate some of the things we discussed, which is one, first of all, thank you so much, Savannah, for doing this with me. I've been wanting to do this for a couple of years now, and it's finally come to fruition. Woohoo! And I'm glad that we get to do it in such a fun way.
Oh yeah, fun definitely. And I'm so excited to have this conversation because this is something that I talk about a ton anyway. So I'm thrilled to join you in this. Thanks for asking me.
Yes, yes, yes. And one thing I did want to say is that one of the reasons I wanted to do this is because it's been such a prevalent theme, especially now. There's a sort of a duality of things happening right now, and there's a lot of masculine, feminine energies that are flying around, even within relationships, romantic relationships, or even friendly relationships. So there's a lot of shifting happening, and sometimes they go to extremes. So I really wanted to just discuss the topic as a whole and have everyone, learn to balance some of these energies so that we don't, go into chaos, right? But for me personally, it has also impacted who I am as I've been balancing those energies in my own life. So I don't know, Savannah, if you wanted to talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah. I think I can definitely relate to that too. And I find the universe is not without a sense of comedy. I have outside men working, bashing. So if you hear like chainsaws or different things going on, then that's what's going on. And I feel like it's very symbolic with what we're talking about today, and having that male energy in the background. But yeah, for me, I guess I've often worked with very powerful women in business, and have also, I guess, been a powerful woman we're women, woman in my own business. And I know that I've definitely leaned into having a more male approach to certain things, not really consciously, if I'm honest, to start off with. I think just because I adopted certain approaches because of who I was around and working with. And it's something that for me, exploring and talking about, nearly lost you there, exploring and talking about women and how we use our male side, or how maybe sometimes we lean hard into our male side and forget the feminine side, feels like a really powerful and empowering conversation, because I believe, especially having witnessed it over the last 10, 15, 20 years,
Yeah.
I really, really believe that there's a way of being powerful and being very feminine at the same time. Like, not that there's anything bad with like male qualities, like they're empowering too, and when used well.
Absolutely.
But I can definitely say that having played with and explored being more vulnerable, being more feminine, going against initially, you know, what I felt was a good idea, has completely transformed my life and made me much happier, actually. So it's an important topic, I think, because you know, there's a lot of chaos going on in our world at the moment, like you said. And when chaos ensues, one of the things I feel like everyone thinks is, oh my God, you know, let's go to what we know, because that's the only way we can get out of this. And whilst there's some validity maybe in that approach, it's also maybe there's chaos because what we've known isn't working, and that needs to change. And so for me, this conversation is about you know, being part of that bigger conversation and opening out, well, what can that change be? What does that change need to even look like? So I'm really, really excited to be chatting with you about this today.
Yes, yes. And it's interesting that you said that we sort of go to what we feel comfortable. So sometimes that's extreme, right?
Yeah.
That's extreme aggression, or you go and hide, right? Like fight or flight. So it's time to discuss it, I think. And again, thank you all for joining us. Please, again, feel free to comment and ask your questions. This is an opportunity for us to have an open conversation about this. And we will be asking you folks a few questions later on, just to gauge where you are in your personal lives, right? Yeah. And I hope you don't mind our stashes today. This is going to be a little bit fun. And if I start talking in a British accent, I'm sorry, not sorry. Okay?
That's all right.
Every time I hang out with Savannah.
I'll try not to start with an American accent, although I feel like I want to do a French accent.
Oh,
I feel like a waiter at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Okay, so Savannah, you want to kick it off and welcome our folks?
Sure. Yeah, so welcome. Delighted to have you here with us today. We're going to talk about this juicy topic. It's something that we've both personally noticed in our own lives, and we're curious to know if you've noticed stuff as well. So do share with us as we go. Chime in with comments, thoughts, ideas, yeses, heck no's, whatever you're moved to share. And what is the it that we're going to talk about? It's women playing very male roles and men, as a result, I think, being nudged more to be more feminine. So what is masculine and what is feminine? And today we're going to talk about masculine. If you've had a look at the introductory video, you'll know that this is the first part of 3. So today's the masculine conversation. In a couple of days, we're going to have a chat about the feminine conversation, but let's kick it off with the masculine. So both men and women and masculinity. Let's dive in with this one. So when we first looked at like having a chat about this, I thought, okay, I'm going to look it up on Google. What does Google say that masculinity is? I have to say I was a little disappointed with the definition, but what we've got so far with masculinity is possession of the qualities traditionally associated with men. So it says handsome, muscle, driven. Prime example of masculinity: virility, manliness, vigor, strength, ruggedness, toughness, robustness. There's not really many words that, for me at least, in that definition, thank you, that for me in that definition really say, this is what a man is, this is what masculinity is as a quality. And the one thing that I thought about really strongly to begin with this, it's like, well, what about spirituality? Like we talk about, this is not a religious conversation, but we talk about like God being a father. So there's that sense that kind of energy of the universe is more male. So spirituality. So to me, when I begin to contemplate that, I start to think about the mind. I start to think about logic. I do think about physical strength, although we'll touch on this when we speak about femininity, because actually I feel our bodies are way more feminine than we give them credit for, men and women included in that. But I do think about strength when I think about men, so physical strength. But it's often more mind, logic, etheric, otherworldly, spirituality, like high morals, all those qualities, focus, action, doing things. And so I was surprised that none of that was in there, personally. The second word that popped into my head when I was looking up masculinity was patriarchy, which is obviously a massive buzzword at the moment with what's happening on our political stage.
Absolutely.
And so I thought, I'm going to look up patriarchy. It's not masculinity, but I want to see what that definition is. And sure, it's an outgrown way of being. It's defined on Google as let's have a look. A system of society or government in which men hold the power and women are largely excluded from it. Again, the thing that screamed at me from that statement was, okay, that's maybe not a great thing that women are largely excluded from the conversation, but actually, who are the men who hold power? And who, if any, when there are women holding power, and there are, who are they as well? Like, it doesn't matter if something is patriarchy or not patriarchy. The main question is, who are the people who are in power, whether they're male or female? You know, you guys, we're not going to, again, tap into the political stuff really, but you guys have your president who is male and playing in all different ways on the world stage.
Let's not even get into that one, girlfriend.
But we have in England, we have a prime minister who's a woman who's doing similar things that are pretty crazy. So it's not about, who's excluded from the conversation. It's who's in power in the conversation. It's who's the person that's in power. It's not if it's a man, it's not if it's a woman. It's about the quality of the human being that's in that role. And so, again, patriarchy didn't really offer up much in terms of any meaningful, significant definition, other than it just having more men speaking and not having women included. But that doesn't help us really, I don't think. So this is a conversation. The reason I feel like these dictionary definitions are so poor is because we don't really explore it. We don't really ask, what is it to be a woman in a man's world? What is it to be more feminine? What is it to be more masculine? Even what are those qualities? So this conversation is about mining some of that, discussing some of that, exploring some of that.
Yeah. And I have to just add that we often just inherit definitions, right? Yeah. From our families, our culture, and however we grew up or wherever we grew up. So we want to not do that and start to explore a little bit more and question instead of just following the herd, right?
Absolutely. And I have a unrelated but great little story. I was talking to one of my clients. It must have been about a year ago, 2 years ago, and she was saying to me, she said something really powerful had happened to her that weekend. I was like, cool, tell me what's happened. She was like, for my whole life, every time, she's a meat eater and loves her roast lambs every Sunday. So she was like, for my whole life, this is how we've cooked our roast lamb. We would, put the lamb in the tray, the leg of lamb, and we'd cut the end of the joint and twist it round, and we put all the stuff around, all the potatoes and all the vegetables all around, and we put it in the oven, and that's what we would do. And I was like, okay, cool. Wondering where she was going with this story. And she said to me that her husband a couple of weeks ago had said to her, why do you cut the end of the lamb? She was like, oh, my mum's always done it. So maybe it's something to do with, I think it's what gives it the flavour. That must be what gives it the flavour. Like, it just helps it cook more evenly. But then she realised, when she really checked in with herself, that she didn't actually know why she did it. So she went and she asked her mum. And she was at her mum's, I think a couple of weeks later. So she asked her mum, and her mum said, oh gosh, well, the reason that I did it is because the oven that we had when you were growing up was too small to fit the whole leg in. So we had to cut the end to turn it round. So this woman who'd had this massive oven had been doing the same thing for years just because it's what she'd been shown. And I feel like it's a perfect example of like where we're at the moment. We do things like you've just said because it's what we've known, it's what everybody's always done.
Absolutely. And I would also say it's because we want to fit, right? We want to fit in. We don't want to hurt the people we love by going against what they think, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how often do we do that, right?
Yeah. How often do we even question it?
Yeah. And especially like, in some cultures, like my culture, as a Latina, you don't question your parents.
Mhm.
You know, you just do as you're told, and don't ask why until we're older, and then obviously we have a little bit more authority and things like that.
Mhm.
But as a kid, you do as you're told. That's it, right? Throw away
Mhm.
the key. So now is the time, you guys. Now is the time to explore, to understand what's going on, to see where you stand, right? And what your thoughts are. And I'm actually kind of glad because a lot of this shifting that's happening in the world is actually allowing people to explore, right? To understand how they really feel. Unfortunately, it's leading to a lot of like dissonance, right? And like splits. But, you know, sometimes you have to get away from other people and circumstances and stuff to really understand who you are.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that this is happening in some way.
Or to know what you're passionate to stand up for.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. Okay, so should we talk a little bit about what we came up with ourselves?
Yeah. Do you want to dive into that?
Yeah, sure. So as we started talking about, you know, one-on-one, what masculinity and femininity are, we started talking about, well, what does it actually mean to us, right? Like there's a definition for it, and sure, it definitely doesn't fit the bill for what we feel it is. But some of the things that we've heard and understood as masculinity are, for example, doers, right? So a lot of times when people say, "Oh, you're kind of masculine," right? Like it's because you're constantly doing things. And actually now, there's a syndrome for it. I talk a little bit about this with some of the women I talk to, which is the busyness syndrome. Isn't that
Mhm.
like a standard like masculine trait to always
Mm.
be doing? And they always say, oh, well, women, you know, we love to multitask and all this, but is that really a feminine quality? I don't know about that, right? It sounds like it's more masculine, like tasking, right? Doing things. So the doer aspect. The other, some other things are the intellect, the mind, right? The logical sense versus the creative sense, which is supposed to be more feminine. So the masculine sense is more intellectual, mind driven. And for us Geminis, we have a little bit of both, right? We have the intellectual side and the creative side. So I'm hoping that we use both. But in any case, the masculine side is the more logical end, the processing, and really just making sense of life and understanding life, right? And then also the aspects that hold, that controls, the fixer and the doer, you know. So my dad, for example, is a super doer. Like he's your typical like male, loves to like tinker with objects, fix things, do things, constantly like furniture, electronics, like all that stuff. So I grew up watching my dad explore that really masculine, you know, aspect of himself. But it's also the one that loves the challenges, right? And is focused on creating solutions. So a lot of times we see guys who are competitive, right? So the standard competitiveness is that, you know, that challenger, that, you know, what's it called? When you're going head to head with someone, boxing. Oh my God, we just had this major boxing thing happen this past weekend. So such a masculine thing, right? Two guys trying to,
Fighting.
you know, fight each other to get points. Fortunately, it's not to the death like back in the day, right?
Mhm. Thank
But
goodness.
it's yes, thank God. But it's still like very masculine aggression, you know, that kind of you know, aspect to it.
Mhm.
So, as we started exploring some of these sort of traits, I started thinking about like, well, there's a dilemma now, right? As we try to embody both aspects of ourselves, and there's a feminine dilemma, and often, but not always, the feminine side, the women, I should say, we try to embody some of these traits that, you know, we want to take on because society has told us, well, this is what we're supposed to be doing. The women is, you know, now we're working hard, we're doing things, we're multitasking and all these things. And we're even embodying the aggressive behaviors. So now it's becoming confusing for some women. You know, am I supposed to, you know, be a certain way and, you know, just relax and chill and be peaceful? Or am I supposed to be now out in the workforce and do things and take care of the kids while cooking, you know, dinner at home and you know, and do all these aspects? So now it's becoming a really big dilemma for us women. And what qualities are we supposed to embody in this day and age, right?
Yeah, totally.
Um,
Like be
yeah, and
driven, work hard, like hustle hard, push,
yeah,
push, push.
absolutely.
You can do,
So
yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, it's that thing of like, you can do it, you know, push harder. You know, you need to, you're just as good as men. And it's like a fight to prove something that actually never really needed to be proved in the first place. And the approach is not necessarily what's going to create the success that you would desire. And I think that's the main point. Like, the definition of success to me is feeling really free, feeling
Yeah.
really empowered in my life. And that includes financial abundance and, you know, time off and time with family or whatever, and trips and all the rest of it. And exploring what I'm passionate about and sharing my work, etc. So it includes all of that. But the approach of pushing to make that happen isn't necessarily something that actually sits well with me when I, you know, when I try to do it. I've tried it, like I have, I'm not going to lie, like it's definitely something I've done, and but it doesn't, it's unwholesome to me,
Yeah.
because it's missing part of when I did it, it was missing part of who I was in that
Right.
process. It was just who I thought I should be, and how I thought I should perform, in order to be
Yeah.
successful. So,
Absolutely. And that's definitely one way that we've sort of felt we had to embody. I also think that survival, right?
mhm.
Like now that we're in this age where we're no longer being married off and sold with cattle or whatever, right?
Yeah,
Now we're
or with a
actually,
dowry.
yeah, or for a dowry, right? We actually have to get out there and, not only find our men, but survive,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
We have to
absolutely.
survive. We have to live. We have to work. We have to, you don't live, well, I can say this is true for everybody, but many people don't live with their parents all their lives anymore, right? There are people who do it, more power to you if you can do that. But, many of us are out there trying to make money, trying to make a living, trying to live, trying
Mhm.
to, create something for ourselves, right? So I think part of it comes from that. And shoot, and I forgot the other piece of it, but let's move on a little bit from this. So back to the dilemma. So it could be, some of the things that you mentioned, and also, survival and all these things. And so we've started to embody some of these masculine traits because of that, right? Um, so, um, so we can embrace sometimes, without controlling. We can embrace masculinity without being controlling. We can engage and be assertive without going to these extremes that some of these women tend to be, right? And we can be assertive and focused and still leave that space for being flexible, being able to change and being dynamic. All these things are possible. So we don't
Mhm.
have to go the extremes. And I think that because we were, at least, from a feminine perspective, so like pushed down, it's almost like we're hyper aggressive about it now.
Mhm.
Like we have to assert ourselves even more to prove something bigger, right? To prove that we are, we're feminine, and you know what, we're masculine too, and I can survive, and I can get a job, and I can, raise 3 kids,
Mhm.
and do it all. So now it's like we've become sort of hyper masculine, hyper doer, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And from my personal perspective, I've seen this in my own family, right? So both of my parents have worked. They both worked. And my dad was super masculine. Like I said, he was a tinker, a doer. He could have been an electrical engineer. And then we moved to this country, and guess what? They hyper worked, both of them, not just one. They had to work to survive. So that's why I mentioned the survival mode prior, because they both had to work in order to help us live. So I had a family history of having to work to live. And so my mother, right, being the feminine, right, woman, whatever, she had like 2 jobs. My dad had like 4, right? So not that there was a competition, but it was needed. It was necessary for, my sister and I to actually live in this country. We had to work to live. But because I saw those things, I also saw, well, okay, I guess that's how women are supposed to be, right?
Mhm.
And I should work hard too. And so actually, our whole family, if you look at the women in our family, engineers, teachers, like they're all, you know, very good at what they do, but they're also very much the doers in the family too, and almost to an aggressive point, right? Like my mom also manages the finances in the family. She's, you know, all these different aspects, she does them now. And so I wonder, like, where does that leave the men these days, right? So I don't know if Savannah, if you had anything to say about that.
I think it's all really good points, and I feel like when women get given the opportunity to kind of explore their masculine side, because also of our intuition, our logic gets super strong, like, because we kind of intuit, oh, this needs to be dealt with, this needs to be dealt with, so we almost jump on things so quickly and then organize that we can almost get what's the word I'm looking for? Like, we can go into override, and the logic just takes over. And I can see it, I saw it with my family as well. Like, I don't think you're alone with that. I don't think you'll probably be alone in this conversation generally. I think a lot of people probably witnessed that, because probably over the last 20, 30 years, that transition has been happening. Many more couples have been, both parents have been working, and that there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that can be very awesome and empowering, and allow for changes in situation and moving country or whatever. But I had the similar thing. So both my parents worked. My father was an architect and a project manager for big building projects and things to do with trains and things like that. So also very kind of technical, and he was always building different parts of the house as well. So he would, he was very hands-on as well as being intellectual about things. And he just expected you to be able to understand that sort of stuff or know that sort of stuff. And if you didn't, you would be told off almost. So that part of me growing up was really encouraged. So like, it's great in some ways. Like, I can get myself in front of any piece of electrical equipment, and I'll be able to figure out how to use it.
Me too.
Yeah. So I'm like super grateful for that. But like my mum was a psychotherapist, and she was having clients at home. Both my parents worked for themselves pretty much. So there was always this thing of like, you need to work hard in order to be successful, and but you can do it, like, you can do this yourself. And I've actually pretty much my whole life been self-employed. Like, I've done a few part-time jobs here and there, but I've never been in full-time employment. I'm not sure at this late stage if I'm actually employable, but I seem to do pretty well on the self-employment side of things. So I really know what it is to go out and hustle and do and take action and get really strong on creating structure. And in some ways I'm super grateful for that. And in other ways, I've also, as I mentioned earlier, like peeling it back and learning what a more empowered feminine approach to it has blown my mind, and actually helped me see how the two things can complement each other. And I feel like that's an important thing to mention, because this conversation, from what I've understood with what we've discussed, is not about like bashing a male approach. Like, there are some beautiful, strong, incredible qualities that are masculine that maybe aren't defined, that we're only beginning to discuss now. Like the doer, the action taker, the planning, the organization, the ability to focus on creating the solution, the logical mind. Like, all of those things have such an important role to play in creating any solutions. But how can we figure out what the right balance is for each of us?
Exactly. And that is the question. And just really quick, just to say hi to our audience. Guys, feel free to ask questions and, chime in with any thoughts as we have this discussion. If we get heated, let us know. We're very passionate women, so it might happen.
And we're just chattering away. So like, I would love to genuinely hear, like, if you guys have got some definitions of what you think like masculinity is, like, chuck it out there. tell us, share with us, like add comments below, because I'm really, really curious what
Yeah,
other
let me ask
things
them.
that is. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So as we let them answer those questions, all right. So let's keep going here. All right. So, I mean, this is all great. And I think, like I said, you know, part of this was also, and like you said, really balancing and teaching everyone, like, well, what do you think masculinity is? What is femininity? And how does that relate to you in your own life and how you grew up? And what do you want to do from here forward, right? So we'll talk about that a little bit more toward the end. But, you know, those are the kinds of questions we need to start asking ourselves. How can we embrace, you know, masculinity more in our own lives? So ask yourself you know, deeper questions like, you know, how are you feeling? You know, are you feeling deeply? Are you feeling very superficially? Because part of, you know, the feminine aspect is also the feeler. And it's kind of interesting because I don't know your father, but my father also was a feeler, but
Yeah,
a bit of an
but
extremist.
yeah, mine too, and not really a feeler, and an extremist definitely in how he would express things, but never into the exploration of the feelings.
Right.
Um,
Right.
it was very much about, I have a big emotion and I'm not okay with it, so I'm going to let it out, and then we're not going to talk about it.
Right.
So that for me was what I witnessed. This is the male role. This is what you do. You have big emotions, but you don't share what's happening. And as a female, like the one thing that I've learned about being empowered in a feminine way, and again, we'll touch on this in a couple of days' time when we talk more about that. But I would definitely say that the more I've listened to, acknowledged, and voiced my feelings, actually, the more everything else in my life has worked, and the more empowered I've felt.
Mm-hmm.
So learning that at a young age from my dad, I have big emotions, but we do not talk about them, is one of the things that kept me personally really locked down in myself. And I think a lot of women experience this. Like, it's not
Yeah.
okay to show your emotions. If you're going to be strong and you're going to survive in this world, like, you just have to keep going, and it doesn't matter if somebody upsets you. You know, you smile sweetly, and you crack on with what you're doing, you know?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I have a quick story about this. So I was dating this guy in 2004 or 5, and I had this moment at work where my boss, you know, had me in her office and she was yelling at me for something I did that was completely unintentional, right? And because I'd never experienced that kind of, you know, interaction, I totally broke down and started crying in her office because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't even understand what was happening, right? Like, I'm like, what do you mean? I did what? You know, like, it just didn't compute, right? So I'm telling my boyfriend at the time about this, and he was just like, why did you do that? How could you cry at your work? You know, crying makes you weak. It was just like, he just went on a tirade about all this stuff, and I just felt so incredibly low.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, often, you know, you attract either what you are or what you've experienced, right? And that's exactly what I've experienced too. My
Mm-hmm.
dad didn't process, right?
Mm-hmm.
I rarely, if ever, saw my dad cry. I've seen him cry more as an adult than as a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
saw my mom cry more.
Mm-hmm.
So, and my dad was like the strong, very male kind of, you know? So, of course, like, it was like that whole dynamic of, well, what's weak and what's strong, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, I I attracted this gentleman in my life who was a great person overall, but his definition of masculinity and femininity were so off from what I really wanted in my own life. So when
Mm-hmm.
he said that, I was flabbergasted, right? I was like, what do you mean that's weakness? And so for a while, it was a confusion in my own mind. Like,
Mm-hmm.
is it weakness, you know, to cry? And because of that and several other factors in my own personal life, I started taking on the traits of, maybe that's where it comes from, Savannah, the
Mm-hmm.
not crying, not expressing, not processing as much, you
Mm-hmm.
know, although that has changed now. But for a while, I took on that quality of not crying in front of people because
Mm-hmm.
it was embarrassing and it was weak, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
And I think that I know from like the thousands of clients I've worked with over the last 20 years, like we're not alone in that. Like there are so many women who won't show that side of themselves, and to the point that I feel they have become so male in their approach, probably unintentionally, but it's intimidating to men.
Yeah.
To the point that men then feel like they need to like keep a little bit at arm's length from those women, and then that's lonely for a woman because a woman doesn't feel as attractive or as feminine or as appreciated as she should be for being strong. So there's this like huge contradiction and almost internal civil war that's going on.
Yeah.
In women at the moment of like, well, how can I be strong and honor what I'm passionate about, because like I'm all about the fierce fiery feminine, but how can I also be the vulnerable? How can you also be the vulnerable, and use the male qualities of the mind and logic and solutions when you need them, but how can you embrace the feelings and the vulnerability when you need that too?
Right. Absolutely. So yeah, so I mean, we need to start asking ourselves these questions. And again, for those of you who are online, please feel free to chime in and give us your thoughts on your experience, your definitions of masculinity and how it has influenced, your life, how people have influenced your life in the respect of those themes. But ask yourself those questions, where are you? Are you the constant doer? Are you pushing your feelings down in order to give some kind of strong pretense about yourself, right? What are you doing? So the fact of the matter is we can actually play an empowering role, right? We both can play an empowering role. And you can use your feelings to get clear on what actions you need to take, right? Like use them as a force, right? Like helping you to process what actions you need to take. We need to use both of these qualities of the feelers and the doers, right? And sort of merge them and marry them to get things done, right? So how do you relax if you're leaning too much on your masculinity? So that's one of the things we're going to cover. So for those of you who have questions, feel free to chime in before we get started on that topic. That way we can start giving you guys sort of ways that you can, nurture that masculine side. That sounds funny to say that, doesn't it? Let's nurture that masculine side.
It does sound funny to say that, but you know what? It's true, because like the healthy male side is like so important. Like we've been so bashing in society, patriarchy, men, male, all that kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong, like I'm all about lifting women up. But I want to also, well, I feel like also it's important to say like men are amazing, incredible creatures that, given the opportunity to step forward, for me, inspire me, show great courage, show great heart, in fact, and have great moral compasses when they're really listening to what's true for them and what they know is right.
Absolutely. So. Agreed. Okay, so how do we relax if we're leaning too much on our masculine side? So I mentioned this before. So a lot of people tend to go into this syndrome. I call it the busyness syndrome, especially women these days, super multitaskers, and myself included. I've done it too. And so now it's a matter of you too, right? I know
guilty. Oh my God. I feel like I'm in jail clothes now.
We do have stripes. I do have stripes. Okay, so a lot of people tend to sort of lean on this whole busyness syndrome, but what if we could leave space, right, for being able to process and appreciation, leaving space for appreciation, sometimes just doing nothing at all, right? Just leaving that space for processing. We could end up getting so much more done, right, as a result of leveraging both of those sides and just allowing your feelings and intuition to flow in and sort of get out of your head every once in a while. I mean, it's kind of liberating. I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm like, okay, if I can just sit down and process sometimes, like I did that this weekend after like 2 days of massive doing with family and hanging out and doing things and going places and whatnot. I'm like, I just want to sit in silence in a dark room and allow myself to process, right? And get out of my head and get back into my body and just like ground myself. That's really how I felt. I wanted to be grounded in what I was feeling and how I can process everything that was, you know, had just already happened. Hey, Michelle. So creating the space for the unknown and breathing excitement and adventure back into your life, that's what we need to start doing a little bit more of. So what are some practical ways that we can do that? Savannah, do you want to talk a little bit about what things we can do?
Yeah, sure, for sure. So, so we've mentioned quite a bit as we've gone through this that the male side is very mind orientated, logic. And so one of the key ways to help create a container for the feelings that you experience in life is actually meditation. It's the art of creating a mind container for the feelings. So what does that actually mean? It's like using the laser sharpness of your mind through specific techniques or mantras to learn how to still your mind or just open a space in your mind for your own wisdom and insight to come up and through. Your feelings then, when you let that happen, those feelings act then as your compass in life. So that's one way of inviting and balancing, inviting the male to hold space for the female to come forward. So there's so many different types of meditation out there. If you have your own practice, then really it's just about, you know, committing to a daily practice with it. And one of the meditations, something I'm super passionate about. I've personally meditated daily for the last 18 years, but I started meditating like 30 years ago. So it's something that I love, 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 love. I have a free meditation on my website. If you don't have a meditation practice and you're not sure, you know, what you want to do, it's a really simple process, and it's especially great for those who have a really, really active mind and for people who've struggled to meditate, because it really means that you engage in it. But I'm going to talk us through, I think, a little meditation practice today. Really simple. Really easy to do, and easy to do absolutely anywhere you are. The only thing I would say is if you're doing this now, obviously make sure you're not operating any like heavy machinery.
Or driving in New York City.
Yes, don't be doing that. So if you're able to, and it's safe to do so, then if you can take a few moments now, and as long as you can hear me, you're okay to go through this process. But if you want to close your eyes, just take a couple of really deep breaths, filling your belly as much as you can, and then taking a big breath out and just letting go. And we're just going to, for the next couple of minutes, we're just going to do a very simple meditation of observing your breath. So as you breathe in, be aware of the sensation around your nostrils, be aware of the air as it passes down through your throat down into your lungs. Feel your lungs expanding, feel them releasing as you then breathe back out. Feel how much your body opens, feel how you drop down into your body with each breath. Feel how when you breathe deeply, you can actually even feel it as far down as your hips and into your buttocks and the tops of your legs. So just use your breath to move through your body. So again, we're going to breathe in deeply and then breathe out deeply. And follow the breathing. Breathe in deeply and breathe out. Feel the sensations in your fingertips. As you breathe deeply, feel the sensations in the tips of your toes. Feel the sensations in your shoulders, down your back, at the back of your head. Feel what it feels like along your spine. Feel as each breath helps that straightness in your spine. Feel as each breath helps your organs to relax. Feel with each breath as your shoulders just release down that little bit further. Feel your cheeks relaxing, your jaw muscles relaxing, your eyebrows relaxing. Feel your scalp even relax. And then take a deep, deep breath, the deepest you've breathed the whole way through this, and just breathe out. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
I think that was a sign. I was waiting for you to say, and relax your mustache.
Well, I hope you did.
I think it's relaxed, don't you?
Yeah,
it's not moving. It's not going
true.
anywhere.
That's true.
Thank you for the hearts, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that. I did. I feel so chill right now.
Oh, cool. Thank you. Yeah, it's really, really, it's so simple, and you can do that anywhere. Just taking that time to help your mind become the vehicle for your feelings in that moment. So there's a little practice that you can have. So there are other practical things you can do too, and I think you're gonna jump in on this one, Teany, aren't you?
Yeah. So, but before that, I just wanted to mention something really quick about meditation. So I have been meditating, and I hesitate to say, it's like not coming out of my mouth, on and off, because one of the things I wanted to say is consistency in everything you do, right, is really what allows you to incorporate that and really solidifies that in your body, really, right? So now I can say I've been consistently meditating for at least a year or two. There goes my British accent.
Very good British accent.
And I have noticed a difference. And actually now, because, you know, during my day job, I talk about it. I say, guys, you know, even if you set up an alarm, just to take 1 minute, you know, in between calls, just to like separate yourself from your computer and just sit back and just relax for a minute. That can be a meditation, you know, just 1 minute. But I actually set alarms several times throughout the day to remind myself to do that. Just because, you know, it's normal. We're busy, you know, we have things to do. We have things happening in our lives. We work, we have kids, you know, whatever tasks you have to do in your life, sometimes you need a reminder, and there's nothing wrong with that. Scheduling that, there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Not only is there nothing wrong, it's like imperative, I think.
Yeah, so actually that's the next thing I wanted to talk about, planning it, right? Use the structure of the masculine to actually plan the space in your days. And like I said, and I personally am a really big lover of the number 1. So I set up at 11:11, 1:11, you know, 11:11 p.m. Like, so I set up these little alarms at these times because, first of all, 1 is an amazing number in numerology. But also just because it's a great way, when you see it on your phone, you're like, oh, cool. And it kind of like gets integrated in your body. Once you see it, it's like once you do something consistently, it gets recorded, right? So when I see that 11:11, it's almost like my body just like, oh yeah, it's time for that. You know, and it's like my body automatically just relaxes now because when I see it, I remember it. Yeah. So, you know, planning, you know, whatever time, whether it's a minute, whether it's 5 minutes, whether you do it at the beginning of your day and at the end of your day, you know, however you have to plan it, you know, within, you know, the days, weeks, months of your year. Plan for chunks of time, you know, that are open. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about this client story because that's exactly what I told one of my clients. She had been having, you know, a really rough time. She was consistently late to her job. And it was almost like she was fighting against authority, fighting against that masculine side of having to do things, you know, at a certain time every single day. And I said, okay, well, why don't you plan and like sort of get up a little earlier, half an hour earlier, get to work, you know, whatever, half an hour to 5 minutes earlier, any time between there, right? No, flexible time. And spend that time just relaxing before you go in. And that totally worked for her because then she realized, oh, now I'm not rushing anymore. Now I'm not having to be busy and do. and have to be here at a certain time, you know, and it was sort of like rough for her. It was a really hard time, but planning that flexibility and that amount of like, I can do whatever I want within up to half an hour of that time allowed her to incorporate a different kind of experience and flow at the beginning of her day. Yeah, and she loved it, and it totally helped her relax because now she wasn't in this chaotic like do and get there on time and I'm gonna be late and now what am I gonna do now? I still have to get breakfast. You know, now it's like, oh, I have half an hour to kill, so I can take my time, walk around. And you know, one of the things that I do, I don't know if this happens to you, sometimes when I'm walking down the street, especially in my neighborhood, because I have a lot of trees, and especially in the fall, they start changing color and they're so gorgeous. I start walking around, and when you give yourself that time, that breathing room, you start realizing and seeing things that maybe you hadn't noticed ever or in a long time. So I started looking at the different trees and seeing how beautiful they were. And honestly, like sometimes I started to get emotional about it and started to like tear up in the middle of the street, and I'm like, I don't care, it's gorgeous. Right? Like I didn't even care, but that moment of like, wow, I'm actually here. I'm not just in my head having to go somewhere and do something and meet someone to help them with whatever, you know. Now I'm like just in the moment experiencing my life and experiencing the world, right?
I love that. I really love that. I feel like that's like such an important thing. If maybe not the most important thing. Like if you are in your life and living it, you can show up for it. Not only are you showing up more for yourself, but also for the people that you care about the most. Absolutely,
yeah. It definitely allows you that space, and it allows you to leave that space for openness and experience what that's like. Leaving time and space for the unknown and the unexpected. I love those words, don't you? Unknown and unexpected. Ooh, as my cat unknowingly and unexpectedly just jumps on my lap. Yeah, so leaving space for those things, it's so fun, right? And it's all based on that feminine side, right? That flow, that openness, that you know, unknown, unexpected, like, ah, what a beautiful world that is.
It makes me think. My days were such that my work days began at 5 a.m. and finished at 11 p.m. and every single minute was scheduled for about 12 years. And that was one of the biggest things that I changed, was how much free time I have and then how much time I'm working and the space for just life and then the stuff that was work orientated. Oh my goodness, I have no words for the difference that made.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, just changing things up is such a big deal, right?
And I mean, fun because you literally don't know what's going to happen in that space. Something always does.
Yeah,
but
no, it does.
But you don't know what it's going to be.
Absolutely. Oh, shoot, I forgot what I was going to say, but leaving space for the unknown and free flowing, it allows you to find new things too, right? So like now, like I'm like, okay, how can I, you know, add more creativity to my life? So I leave open spaces of like, okay, 5-10 minutes to do whatever, right? To write a poem, maybe draw something I used to love to draw, you know, some kind of, you know, creative outlet, journaling, you know, there's so many great things that we can do. Okay. So, where are we? So now I want you guys, if you guys have any questions at all, if you guys want to talk a little bit about your experiences, for those of you who are online here, let me pose the question. Feel free to leave your comments, questions, and feelings, thoughts about how you've experienced masculinity in your own life. Is anyone out there? And if you don't want to talk, that's okay. I know this is like a sensitive topic for people. That's why I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. Let's be open about it. Let's, like, you know, digest and explore all the different angles. And if people don't, you know, have questions right away, that's okay. Because I imagine that this is the kind of thing where people want a little bit of private one-on-one.
Yeah.
Sometimes, right?
People can DM as well if they want to, because we're going to be talking about, we're going to be continuing to talk about this later in the week, and then at the beginning of next week as well. We've got, a merger on the two. So it is a delicate subject, I guess. It's probably why it's not such a public conversation, but it's also why it needs to be a public conversation.
Absolutely.
Because it's okay to talk about this stuff. Or
Yeah.
if it doesn't feel like it's okay, it needs to become okay to talk about this stuff. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And so we're talking about masculinity today. I'll get to a couple of questions, but the next topic on Thursday will be femininity. So we'll be in our best, our best get up for that. Ooh.
A little bit more lady.
A little bit more ladylike. But definitely feel free to leave any, comments, questions, and we can address them on Thursday. I would love, love, love you guys to give some feedback on any, revelations you might have had, because I actually had coaching for this topic and I didn't even know I was getting it. I went in for one problem and came out with solutions for another, right? Isn't that what usually happens?
Uh-huh.
And what I realized is, as I was getting, was being coached, that I was way too much. I mean, we've kind of discussed it at length already, but I was very much in my masculine side. And what I realized is I really wanted to embrace my feminine side more. And the more I did that, the happier I actually felt and the more in myself I was, right? The more myself I felt, right? So the question to you guys is, what is authentically you? Like, we've both have had to explore that, especially having really, a lot of masculinity thrown at us from both sides, from mom and dad. What is most authentically you? And what percent, based on our conversation today, is masculine and feminine? Are you 70-30? Are you 50-50? It doesn't even matter. Hey, Suhaidi. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you like my mustache. So ask yourself that question, right? Like, what percent is you? What percent are you now, and what percent do you want to be, right? Because I think I was definitely more like 70 or 80, right? Masculine, and maybe 20-30 feminine. But I really wanted to tip the scale like in the other direction, because that's really who I was more authentically. And then what makes you feel most yourself, and what makes you feel the freest, right? What is most you? What is you at the most free-flowing way, aspect of you? How does that feel, right? All right. So I don't know, Savannah, if you had anything else to add before we close up shop here.
I don't think so. I think we've covered a lot. I'd love to hear. I'd love, if you're not happy to share it openly, I would love to have you write down your percentages, like after this talk, after the next talk, and just to see if it changes, just so that you have a reference. I know for me, I'd similar to you. Was probably like, I'd actually say I was like 90% male and like maybe 10% female. Like really, and then, but wanting to be completely the other way.
Yeah.
And now I would say percentage wise, I'm probably like, I don't know, maybe like 40-60. I'm like much more happy with it. Actually, much more happy with it.
So 40 male and 60 female?
Yeah. Yeah. There's still work. There's still work to do. But
and I will also say that it changes over time, and it changes in circumstances, right? Sometimes we need to bring out the masculine aspect of ourselves to get things done, or whatever, however that manifests for you. And sometimes we need to be more on the feminine side. So it's okay, right? The question really is not, where are you at every instance of your life? It's like, where are you generally? Like, what is your, happiest place, happiest medium between femininity and masculinity?
Yeah, that's the most important thing. It's like, what makes you feel the most alive? Yeah, because that's how I shifted and adjusted my stuff. That's what I support my clients with as well. It's like, it doesn't matter if being that much more male is what brings vitality into your being. But when you are, irritated, angry, stressed, And because you're overworking that side of you, when in fact you're deeply creative and suppressing that part of yourself, you're not at your happiest, you're not at your freest, and you don't feel alive. And so that's not going to be the right balance for you. But it's only by going in and getting honest with that, and addressing it, and then exploring it, and then making changes with it, that you can make the shifts that you need to. And that also takes time. A great book that I'm reading at the moment, actually, I don't know if you've read this one, actually, Teany, but it's great, is Tears to Triumph by Marianne Williamson. And it's talking, actually, you have read it?
No, I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, it's talking about very similar to what we've discussed today, like what the system of like patriarchy is, how that's causing issues in the world generally, and then how going into the tears is what will help you create the triumph in your life, and like how it's okay to feel deeply, because if you feel on a shallow level, then you're not really embracing all of who you are. It's a great book. So if you haven't read it, I'd highly recommend it to anybody who's like really serious about exploring this topic for themselves.
Absolutely. I'll post after we finish this conversation, I'll post the link to the book and to our websites, and that way you can get Savannah's meditation. And at any time, if you guys have any questions or need any coaching from any of us, please feel free to engage us. We may or may not have our mustaches on. I
think they might check. Then we might change. I think we're going to the lady look.
I know. Okay, so our next session is going to be all about femininity, and that'll be on Thursday. Oh, we have one. Hold on. So Siania says that she's 60-40. She's at her happiest with 40, though she's very much a girly girl, but she does feel like she needs that 60 for many reasons.
Cool. Awesome.
Listen, it's all about awareness. Doesn't matter what your numbers are, as long as you're happy with what your numbers are.
Absolutely.
Okay? That's what matters. And also, if you're attracting the people that you want to attract based on that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you're very feminine and you're attracting a very masculine man, great. If you're kind of masculine woman and you're attracting a feminine man and you don't want that, time to tip the scale a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Thursday we're talking about femininity. It's at 8:30 Eastern Standard, 1:30 p.m. GMT. Put it in your calendars now. And any questions, thoughts, comments, please reach out to us. And if you need any help with anything related to this topic, feel free to reach out to us as well. And we'll continue to explore these wonderful topics together and learn how to merge these two and bring balance for these into our lives. Thank you, Savannah, so much for joining me being my co-host.
Oh my God, I've loved it. Thank you so much. Oh yeah, I'm loving my cat as well.
Absolutely. Love you guys. And I wish you the best in exploring this topic. I'll talk to you guys on Thursday.
Have
Bye.
fun. Take care. Bye.